There is something very human about being curious about what goes on inside our own head and those of others. To have a fundamental idea of what makes people tick, the different personality types that exist and what characterizes them, how traits manifest in actions and the consequences of certain pathologies take hold. Whatever your wheelhouse is, most of us have a rudimentary interest in psychology, so that we can get a better understanding of how to take control of our lives and why people act in certain ways around us when we just don't comprehend why they do what they do. Some of us probably have some exposure to psychology to varying degrees, whether that is light videos from Psych2Go or following pop psychologists like Jordan Peterson. Perhaps you have an understanding of Freud or have delved deeper into chimpanzee psychology with Duvall, played with Piaget, studied behavior with Skinner, or maybe even looked at the archetypical and mythological depths of the psyche with Jung. Whatever your expertise in the field of psychology, if you're wanting to write convincing characters, it is useful to know how and why people behave as they do, or at least have a reasonable understanding of such. You obviously don't need to be a psychologist to write a book. There are thousands of successful authors who are not psychologists, but having some knowledge about the human psyche can be very useful for planning your characters. The reason for this is that it allows you to know what makes different characters tick, to know how they are going to react in certain situations, and this allows you to make more consistent and logical decisions for them. Most characters are not real. They are figments of our imagination or amalgamations of things that we've seen in the real world, and as such you need to distinguish them from one another and make sure that they stand apart. This becomes even more important if the story you're writing has elements of psychology built in. If, for example, you're writing about serial killers, it'll be important to know the psychological theories surrounding such individuals, as well as the stresses and impacts that such investigations can take on the police officers. It may be enough to lean on certain cliches of a genre, like detectives drinking to deal with the stress of their job, as most of these will be built on some grain of truth, but you risk having your Psychology 101 understanding come across as generic. Not every psychopath has mummy issues, and not every detective smokes. If you want to make your crime thriller stand out, it may be worth investing a little deeper into the weeds and bucking the generic trends that plague each and every genre with a more accurate and theory-influenced writing around the psychology that exists. More than avoiding cliches, understanding some psychological principles can help you craft really interesting, deep and intriguing characters that can suck your reader into the world. By crafting more realistic actors whose behaviors and reactions are based on something more scientific, you will make a story more interesting. Each interaction between characters will be more of a challenge to write, yes, but will make it far more intriguing to read. In the speech pattern video, we discussed using unique speech to help overcome the tendency to use one voice for all your characters, and having a host of characters with a range of psychological profile also helps to give variety to your story. You are trying to avoid every character having the same personality as you, your warts and all, but instead have a more realistic and representative group with different fears, abilities, breaking points and passions, as well as being at different points of their life, which could affect their competency in each situation that they face. It allows you to have more range when planning a story arc, as you can more accurately plot the actions required to overcome one psychological impediment or achieve another development. You'll be able to do this with a realistic timeline and proportionate actions so that your story doesn't feel too rushed or too sluggish. How you go about understanding more psychology is ultimately up to you. If you want to read 500-page books, go ahead. If you're satisfied and feel that your knowledge is deep enough from watching YouTube videos, then that's okay too. But understanding psychology in a little bit more detail will allow you to write more intelligently, and in a more informed manner that will mean your characters come across better. Their actions will make more sense, their redemption and fall will be more satisfying, your foreshadowing can be better placed, their abilities and faults can be more realistic, and your reader will get much more enjoyment from reading a book that is based on science, rather than using tired cliches of each genre as a clutch. Your chosen one doesn't have to reject the opportunity in every fantasy story. Instead, you should read Jung's theories on heroic characters. The smaller sibling doesn't have to hate the larger one, but you can read Skinner's experiments with rats to find out how this could occur. The king can rule as a tyrant or a benevolent ruler, but Duvall's studies on chimp hierarchies can help you identify the key characteristics of a good leader. Psychology gives us a great insight into how and why people act the way they do. It's worth exploring to help your story be even stronger.